From an early age, we are conditioned to seek the approval of others. The smiles, nods, and expressions of our parents subtly teach us to rely on external validation, a practice we unconsciously carry into adulthood. This constant need to please everyone, even strangers, becomes a silent prison in our modern world. Society places immense emphasis on social validation, on being seen favorably in the eyes of others. As a result, countless men and women find themselves stuck in a stagnant cycle, often sacrificing their own dreams and desires out of fear of judgment. While it's natural to care about what others think to some extent, it facilitates smoother social interactions. This obsession with approval can become toxic. Spending hours imagining what others think of us doesn't just drain our mental energy, it robs us of the chance to truly live. As philosopher Richard Taylor emphasized in Restoring Pride, many of us care far too much about the opinions of others. We exaggerate the value of social approval and develop an irrational fear of disapproval, criticism, or rejection. Instead of charting a path aligned with our talents, strengths, and passions, we conform to what others expect, often at the expense of our own happiness. Social validation, in reality, is tethered to superficial metrics: external success, material possessions, physical appearance, fashion choices, and even the perceived status of the people we associate with. These fleeting markers of worth create an illusion of value. The moment we tie our happiness to the approval of others, we relinquish control over our emotional well-being. In this mindset, praise becomes a drug that leaves us euphoric, while disapproval sends us spiraling into sadness and anger. This dynamic has only intensified in the age of social media, where likes, comments, and followers are treated as measures of self-worth. Many have made the approval of others the central focus of their lives, with positive attention morphing into a prerequisite for happiness. Tragically, this pursuit of validation often revolves around impressing people we barely know, or worse, people whose opinions are uninformed or baseless. The irony? We invest so much energy chasing approval from others, many of whom are as preoccupied with their own insecurities as we are. Consider this. A study conducted in Great Britain, known as the National Worry Audit, surveyed 2,000 adults and revealed a staggering truth. On average, Britons spend 6.5 years of their lives worrying. Many of these concerns are rooted in the opinions of others. For instance, 28% worry about their appearance, 21% fret over what to wear, and 17% stress about body odor. With the current life expectancy in the UK being 81 years, this means approximately 8% of a person's life is spent consumed by what others might think. But what if we stopped? What if we broke free from this relentless need for external validation? Imagine reclaiming those years and dedicating them to pursuing what truly brings us joy, fulfillment, and purpose. Letting go of the obsession with others' opinions isn't just liberating, it's transformative. And it's a step we owe ourselves if we truly want to live life on our own terms. Life is too short and fragile to waste energy worrying about what others think. Imagine how many more years you could dedicate to enjoying life or doing something meaningful if you let go of that burden. As Kahim and Koga, authors of The Courage to be Disliked, argue, the key to happiness lies in having the courage to be despised. They emphasize that freedom comes from not depending on the approval of others, a liberating idea that can reshape the way we live. According to Kahim and Koga, our interactions with others are often driven by two main goals: either seeking their approval or striving to make a positive impact on their lives. They assert that unhappy people tend to focus on the former, believing that happiness comes from being seen as good by others, whether it's a teacher, a parent, or society as a whole. Yet, this relentless pursuit of validation only leads to dissatisfaction and unhappiness. These individuals falsely equate being loved or approved of with being good, which traps them in a cycle of dependence and frustration. Some might argue that seeking approval is a natural part of being human, but as the authors explain, this is a flawed perspective. We don't chase approval because it brings us happiness. We chase it because it satisfies a deeper, unfulfilled need within us. So why do so many people crave recognition from others? Kahim and Koga point to the influence of a reward and punishment system ingrained in us from an early age. This conditioning teaches us to equate approval with success and disapproval with failure. Even when people manage to secure the approval they seek, it often comes at a steep cost. In their pursuit of validation, they end up living according to the expectations of others, sacrificing their freedom and ultimately their happiness. They become trapped in a cycle of constantly evaluating others' feelings and worrying about their opinions, a way of living that is anything but free. Kahim and Koga highlight that true happiness requires the courage to break free from these constraints and embrace the possibility of being disliked. This courage is transformative. When you stop fearing disapproval, your relationships become lighter, more natural, and more genuine. But let's face it, ignoring the approval of just one person can be a significant challenge. In the presence of a group or a crowd, this need for validation often grows stronger. Social anxiety takes hold, making us tense and nervous in situations like public speaking or group gatherings. This anxiety prevents us from acting authentically, holding us back from thriving in these settings. The worst part is that this constant fear of judgment, of ridicule, rejection, or disapproval keeps us from living in alignment with our own values. It forces us into conformity, robbing us of the freedom to follow our own path. But there is a way forward. Kahim and Koga suggest that reducing this fear begins with exposure. By intentionally facing what scares us, we can gradually desensitize ourselves and build resilience. This practice isn't new. Ancient philosophers often advocated for intentional action as a way to overcome fear and embrace personal freedom. To stop living as a reflection of others' expectations, we must take deliberate steps toward independence. It's not about being indifferent to everyone, but about learning to prioritize your own conscience over external validation. When you do, you unlock the courage to not just survive, but to truly live. To provoke social disapproval might seem counterintuitive, but it can be a powerful practice for cultivating personal freedom. The Roman senator Marcus Porcius Cato, a follower of Stoic philosophy who lived in the 1st century BCE, was a staunch advocate of this approach. As William Irvin explains in A Guide to the Good Life, the ancient art of Stoic joy, one way to overcome our obsession with seeking admiration from others is to consciously engage in actions likely to elicit their contempt. Cato made a habit of defying societal norms, deliberately ignoring the prevailing trends and fashionable dictatorships of his time. According to Plutarch, Cato didn't do this to attract attention or out of reverse vanity. Instead, he sought to train himself to feel embarrassment only for things that were truly shameful. He actively dismissed the trivial opinions of others, focusing instead on what genuinely mattered. By performing acts that provoked disdain, he practiced the art of ignoring such reactions, building a mental resilience that freed him from the constraints of public judgment. Another striking example of this practice comes from Diogenes the Cynic, who lived in the 4th century BCE. Diogenes routinely performed acts designed to provoke ridicule, rejection, and contempt, not out of rebellion, but to condition himself to be unaffected by others' opinions. One famous instance involved him walking backward in a theater as the crowd exited, a deliberate act of nonconformity. When people mocked him and questioned his behavior, he famously replied, "You are not ashamed of walking the wrong way in life, but you mock me for walking backward." Through such practices, Diogenes achieved a level of freedom and detachment that few could imagine. Diogenes' indifference to the judgments of others was profound. The opinions of the masses held no weight over him, and he prioritized self-mastery over societal validation. For Diogenes, life wasn't about living up to external expectations, but about cultivating greatness within himself, mastering his body and mind. When someone pointed out that most people laughed at him, he replied, "Of course donkeys also laugh at them, but just as I don't care about the donkeys, I don't care about them." His mindset illustrates the ultimate liberation from the need for approval, a life dictated by personal values rather than external pressures. Despite his unconventional lifestyle, Diogenes was not universally scorned. On the contrary, his character earned the admiration of many, including notable figures of his time. Alexander the Great, for instance, was so impressed by Diogenes' independence and character that he once remarked, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." This story reminds us that freedom from the opinions of others isn't about living recklessly or seeking to offend. It's about aligning your life with your own values and principles. By learning to dismiss the superficial judgments of others, you create space to cultivate true self-mastery and fulfillment. In the end, the courage to provoke disapproval can lead to a life of unparalleled freedom and authenticity. To aspire to live like Diogenes is to move closer to a life of freedom and authenticity, where the weight of others' opinions no longer dictates our actions. To embrace this ideal, it's crucial to adopt a specific mindset. Acts of non-compliance are not performed to appear foolish or to draw attention. Instead, their purpose is far more profound. They help us explore human nature and uncover our own potential. As Nietzsche called it, this is the art of psychological observation. Every instance of laughter, ridicule, or disapproval we provoke becomes an opportunity to learn something new, not about others alone, but about ourselves. Arthur Schopenhauer advises us to treat these moments not as sources of distress, but as lessons. He compares it to a miner finding a rare and unique specimen in the depths of a mine, a discovery that enriches understanding. In this sense, the disapproval of others adds to our knowledge about human behavior, not to our burdens. Understanding that someone's opinion is simply theirs and not a universal truth can liberate us. Their thoughts are not set in stone, and their judgment cannot define our value unless we allow it to. To cultivate a healthier attitude toward the opinions of others, the first step is reflection. Whose approval are we truly seeking? Do these individuals deserve our respect and admiration? Are they growing, curious, independent thinkers, capable of forming their own opinions? Or are they conformists, echoing whatever they hear from celebrities, influencers, or politicians without question? If someone does not impress us, why should we feel the need to impress them? The Stoic philosopher Seneca posed this very question, criticizing those who find joy in applause from the ignorant. How foolish is the one who leaves a classroom with a happy heart simply because they received praise from those whose praise they themselves cannot respect. Similarly, Schopenhauer reminds us that what happens in the minds of others should in truth be irrelevant to us. With time and reflection, we become indifferent to the superficial and fleeting nature of most people's thoughts, their limited concepts, shallow feelings, and distorted opinions. When we see how often these thoughts are driven by misinformation, bias, or even lies, we begin to free ourselves from the weight of their judgment. A second way to diminish the sting of ridicule is to consider the source. Those who are quick to criticize or judge are often not people of sound mind. They are individuals consumed by their own insecurities, projecting their misery, self-hatred, or dissatisfaction onto others. Their hostility often says more about their inner struggles than it does about the person they criticize. When we encounter these reactions, remembering this truth can help us separate their words from our sense of self. Moreover, the way people respond to us is often a reflection of their own character and circumstances. Hostility, indifference, or even sadness directed toward us may have little to do with who we are. This realization not only softens the blow of rejection or ridicule, but empowers us to live with greater confidence and clarity. Ultimately, embracing the philosophy of Diogenes, Seneca, and Schopenhauer teaches us that freedom lies in detachment. It is the courage to focus inward rather than outward, to live not for the fleeting approval of others, but for the steady cultivation of our own greatness. Through this practice, we free ourselves from the invisible chains of judgment and step into a life of true independence and fulfillment. Our actions, or even our mere presence, often evoke reactions from others that may seem personal, but in reality are not. Many of these reactions stem from unconscious processes within people, reflecting aspects of themselves they might not even recognize. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist, described this as the phenomenon of projection. He believed that individuals tend to repress undesirable traits into their unconscious, creating what he called the shadow. This hidden part of the psyche often manifests externally. We see in others what we fail to acknowledge in ourselves. When we dislike something about someone else, it's often because that same trait exists within us, triggering an emotional, adversarial reaction. As Psychology Today explains, projection allows individuals to attribute feelings or impulses they find unacceptable to others, avoiding the discomfort of confronting those traits within themselves. This process often happens unconsciously, serving as a defense mechanism. Jung himself observed that projections transform the world into a replica of our own unknown face. In other words, we all view the world through a uniquely personal lens, shaped by our unconscious mind. Understanding this allows us to put others' opinions into perspective. Their judgment is often more about their internal struggles than it is about us. Ancient philosophers understood this dynamic well. Practices like voluntarily exposing oneself to ridicule and rejection weren't about seeking discomfort, but about learning an essential truth. The world doesn't crumble when someone disapproves of us. Insults, judgments, and mockery lose their sting when we are at peace with our own choices. Over time, such external negativity becomes no more than empty noise, a breeze that passes through our ears without disturbing our minds. This resilience frees us from the compulsion to live according to others' expectations, opening the door to a greater life, one guided by our own essence and values. The antidote to worrying about what others think lies in cultivating self-confidence. When we are insecure and plagued by feelings of inferiority, we become dependent on external validation and constantly fearful of disapproval. On the other hand, if we channel our energy into strengthening our mind and body, improving our character, pursuing our goals, and building a life we're proud of, the opinions of others, whether good or bad, gradually lose their grip on us. They shrink in importance until they become insignificant. The truth is, no matter what you do, there will always be people who disapprove of you. This is an unavoidable reality of life. The only path to lasting happiness is to accept this fact and find the courage to live a life you believe is meaningful and good, regardless of what others might think. Letting go of the need for approval and embracing the courage to be disapproved of is liberating. It allows us to prioritize what truly matters, living authentically, aligned with our values and dreams. In the end, happiness isn't found in being universally liked. It's found in staying true to yourself. Only then can you cultivate a life that reflects your deepest aspirations and beliefs. The courage to be disapproved of is, ultimately, the courage to truly live.